Okay, does there not need to be an introduction?
Hi all, my name is Sarah Kadu, a library and information science educator based in Uganda and President Uganda Library and Information Association, ULIA. I welcome you all, our dear participants from across Africa and beyond. I also wish to recognize the participants who have joined us live on our Facebook page. Today's presentation is entitled Libraries, Open Access, and Sustainable Development Goals. As you may be aware, many libraries are struggling to ensure content is accessible in the open domain. You may also recall that libraries are working so hard to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by the year 2030. I am sure the presentation is going to help us understand better the role libraries should play in realizing open access and the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, especially during this new normal. Please note, the webinar materials shall be shared with all participants who have registered. A recording of the webinar shall be uploaded to AFLIA YouTube channel. All participants are encouraged to use the Q&A box for all questions. Some questions might be answered as the presentation goes on, and others will be answered after the presentation. Allow me to introduce our resource person, David Ball. David is the owner of David Ball Consulting that specializes in all aspects of scholarly communication, open science, open access, and library management. He chairs CILIP's UKeiG Information Group, and CILIP is the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals. He is also a committee member of CILIP's International Library and Information Group. For 2 years, he was project officer for SPARC Europe, working on 2 European open science projects. While spending a year in Uganda, David worked with COOL, and COOL is Consortium of Uganda University Libraries, funded by AFL, Electronic Information for Libraries, on open access, policy, development, and implementation. Join me in welcoming David to speak to us. David, the participants are looking forward to the presentation. Over to you, David.
Sarah, thank you very much for the introduction. And thank you also to AFLIA and to CILIP for inviting me to talk today. I'm very impressed by the number of delegates we have, and I hope that you enjoy the presentation. And as Sarah said, there will be time for questions after the presentation, at the end of the presentation. I'll also be providing a sheet of references and URLs that are mentioned or referred to in the text, so there's no need for you to necessarily. Today's webinar will cover these areas. I'll start by talking a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals and how libraries are supporting them and can continue to support them. I'll then move on to the areas which are perhaps key in order to support the development goals. Open science, particularly open access, which traditionally has referred to articles, but there's a lot of work going on at the moment to include monographs as well. I'll then turn to talk about open data, which has been lagging behind open access, but is becoming more and more important in terms of open science. And then I'll close by making some remarks on how we might go about promoting open science in order to support the development goals. Next slide, please. There are 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I'm highlighting here the particular ones where libraries and information provision can play a major role. This is not to say that it is unimportant for the other goals, but these are the ones which might be benefit from having the most library input. So goal 1 is no poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger. And here, obviously, agriculture plays a major role, and agricultural information is very well provided by libraries. Goal 3, good health and well-being. Again, libraries have a traditional role in providing health information, and that will continue. Goal 4 is quality education. And here again, libraries play a major part in, for instance, inculcating information and ICT skills, and in providing access to ICT and to learning resources. Goal 5 is gender equality. Can we have the next slide, please? Goal 6, clean water, and 7 on clean energy as well. Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. Goal 9 is a key one for library input in terms of the enhancing research, enhancing access to ICT and to the internet, all very much core library concerns and activities. Goal 10 is on reducing inequalities. Could we have the next slide, please? Sustainable cities and communities. Again, here information provision it does have an important role, but environmental information is probably very important for Goal 13, climate action, but also for Goals 14 and 15, life below water and on land. Goal 16 is one that actually mentions ensuring public access to information. And the final one, 17, is for partnerships to meet the goals, to develop the goals and meet them. Open science has a major role in achieving many of the sustainable development goals, and librarians have major input in terms of being mediators, being facilitators, and being builders of both the physical and intellectual infrastructure in support of open science. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. There are 5 elements of open science which are very well known. Firstly, open notebooks. This is an emerging practice, not necessarily taken up very widely yet, but it encourages the documentation and sharing of the process of trial and error that goes on in laboratories during the research process. So it's a day-to-day record of how research has progressed. Open data, it is most important to manage research data to enable and optimize access, discoverability, and sharing for use and reuse. It is only through the provision of the data that supports or played a large part in the provision of the research. To be shared, to be available, because that will enable people other researchers to validate and to build on the data. Open research software is produced during the course of research. And again, this must be made available and freely accessible for collaboration. Open access, we have all been very much aware of open access over the past 20 years. It entails making all published outputs freely accessible for maximum use and impact. Peer review, open peer review, the current black box approach means that it is invisible. The peer review process is invisible to other people, but there are moves afoot to make the peer review process open, dynamic. One final area, which has not really been exploited yet, is open bids for funding. Instead of institutions and academics competing with each other for much the same programs, then making the bids themselves open will enable collaboration and will cut out a lot of the time that can be wasted in the year or 2 years it takes to form a bid for funding. Next screen, please. Next slide. Here, this taxonomy has been developed by the Foster EU project, and it details the different elements of open science, which you can see are many and varied. And I enclose it also in the handouts that you will get, so you don't need to particularly bother too much about it right now. But it does illustrate the complexity and the areas for development of open science. Next slide, please. So turning to the open research process, what does it actually look like? What actually happens? Well, it needs to be publicly available. It is difficult to benefit from and use knowledge if it's hidden or hidden behind a paywall, or is just archived on a USB stick that sits in someone's desk drawer. The open research must be reusable, and it must be clear as to what what outputs may be used and under what terms, and any conditions and limitations on use. Open research will also induce collaboration between researchers, enabling better access to and better online tools. And finally, it must be transparent and have the metadata that allows discovery and incorporates clear statements of how the research output was produced and how it can be reused. Next one, please. Yep, the OECD published a few years ago now a paper on making open science a reality, and they highlighted some of the rationales for open science, and I've included 4 of them here. The first was improving efficiency. Transferring and reusing data enables more research to be done on the same data, and thus provides many opportunities for both domestic and global participation in the research process. It increases transparency and quality by allowing the greater replication and validation of the results of research. Next slide, please. Open science also fosters the speed of transferring knowledge. If things are available immediately on the internet, through the internet, then the results of research can be reused, can be used by other people, and in transferring and in providing innovation, so that research can be turned into development of results. It allows us also to address the global challenges, and obviously that is important, very much important at the moment in terms of making data available which will support the suppression of the virus. And yeah, go on please, next slide. Right, so that is open science in outline. Now I'm going to go on to talk initially about open access. And we start off with a definition of toll access, commonly known as TA. And toll access has been the traditional model over the years of people making a payment to access the articles. And toll access is important to realize gives no other rights apart from the right to access. So it gives no rights to reproduction, for instance, or to use in other ways, apart from perhaps the fair dealing aspects of many copyright laws. Generally, it has been achieved through subscription to a journal, either by an individual or more prevalently by a library. And the electronic form has allowed the big deals collective access to literature, which have become very common and have in fact cemented the position of publishers as the sole providers of rights. Alternatively, individual copies of articles may be purchased, and we are also seeing purchase or subscription to monographs. Next one, please. I'll just leave you to read through this for a moment. There's the seminal statement in the Budapest Open Access Initiative. So this came out in 2002. So it is about access, but it is very much as well about rights. The only role for copyright should be to give authors control over the integrity of their work and the right to be properly acknowledged and cited. So that is a far-reaching permission. You have the next slide, please. So in brief, the Budapest Open Access Initiative allows access, promotes access, but also promotes wide-ranging rights of use, reproduction, and exploitation. We have seen the full text, but Peter Suber has come out with this much more succinct statement. Open access literature is digital, online, free of charge, and free of most copyright and licensing restrictions. Next slide, please. Green and gold open access, these are the two traditional forms. Green open access is delivered through self-archiving. So authors make available in repositories their manuscripts. Repositories may be either institutional, which aiming to capture all of the articles produced in a particular institution, or they may be disciplinary, aiming to capture all the articles in a particular discipline. Gold open access is delivered through journals. These may be completely open access or hybrid, which can be rather confusing and allows the publishers a chance, I think, to increase their charges. So the hybrid journal, it becomes obvious which are open access and which are not. Next slide, please. Turning first to green open access. Green open access relies on the infrastructure of repositories, which has been developed so that many or most universities, for instance, have an institutional repository made available to the public. It is easy and cheap. It relies only on the repositories, and obviously the repositories cost in order to set them up and in order to maintain them, but articles have a very cheap access, have very cheap route as has been documented by Alma Swan, costing perhaps only between £6 and £15 per article to deposit, taking full account of the investment in hardware and in the investment in development and maintenance. Green open access does not incur the overheads of peer review, although most deposited articles have already been through the peer review process in order to be published in toll access journals. So one might say that toll access, the green open access rides on the back of traditional toll access. Next slide, please. Turning to gold open access. The gold open access articles will appear in both open access and hybrid journals. They follow the same sort of process of peer review towards publication, and they incur several of the costs for the editorial and peer review as toll access journals. Gold open access is always immediate, while green open access is often subject to the embargoes imposed by subscription journal publishers, which can be for 6 months, for a year, for maybe 2 years. So the green open access is restricted in terms of embargoes. Next, please. Sorry, can you go back one? Right, thanks. Gold open access provides access to the published version of an article. Green open access deposits are generally the author's final manuscript agreed with the publisher. It is not in the form of the published article. The content is the same, but the presentation is different. So gold open access means that the final paper is made available immediately, and with all of the sophistication of the journal. So it is in fact a postprint, and generally the rights and permissions come from direct from the rights holder, from the author, which is not the same with green open access, which comes from the publishers. Next one, please. So it is important to bring in policies and mandates on open access for institutions and for funders, because this will drive the volume of open access materials if it is insisted upon within institutions and by funders that deposit must be made. There are advantages in open access for institutions. They include being a showcase for the research output of the institution, bringing greater visibility and enhanced reputation. They are also of course effective in increasing funding because there is an open public record of the output of the university. And this can attract as well both potential students and research staff. They are important for researchers because they bring about an increase in citations, and impact because the articles are readily available on the internet. And that might bring about the creation of new collaborators. Next one, please. The policy lives in the environment of the university or of the funder. In particular, in terms of institutions, the open access policies should relate to the overarching research policy of the institution. They should also relate to appropriate funders' policies, so that there is no dichotomy, there's no difference between the requirements of the institution and the requirements of the funder. And they should also take account of the strategy for the institutional repository. Now, policies are all very well as long as they are adhered to. So it is necessary for senior management staff, for pro vice chancellors, for research, for instance, to support the introduction and alignment with the policy. It is no good if there is not that support, that senior support. And here is an area where libraries have taken the lead within institutions, and the paper given there by the University of Turin offers a step-by-step guide to the best practice in introducing and bringing to prominence the open access policy of their institution. Next slide, please. The open access policies should address whether or not the policy is mandatory, how open access should be provided through deposit in an open access repository or by publication in open access journals. They may both be permissible. Where repository-based open access is concerned, in which repository or repositories items may be deposited. Next one, please. Next slide, please. The European Project Pasteur 4OA spend a lot of time examining what are the most relevant or the critical elements of a policy. The first is that the policy states that research articles must be deposited in the institutional repository, i.e. the policy is mandatory. The policy should also state that this action cannot be waived. And finally, this policy links the deposit of articles with research assessment or performance evaluation procedures. So, for instance, universities in the UK and elsewhere have started insisting that academics applying for higher posts or for additional salary grades, the process will only be carried out on articles which have been deposited in the repository. And that applies as well to where countries such as the UK have research assessment exercises. These typically will insist that they will only only pay attention to articles which have been deposited in open access repositories. They may also stipulate that deposit must be made on acceptance by the publisher, because that is, sorry, can we move back? Can we go back? Can we go back, please? All right, that's fine, yeah, thank you. The last point there is that the policies should also stipulate that deposit must be made on acceptance by the publisher, not on the publication date, which could be years in the future, and not when the researcher feels like doing it. Okay, next please. We find that monographs are also becoming quite well known in terms of open access. Most of what we've been talking about this far has applied to articles, but monographs are becoming much more common in terms of being open access. They are more complex in many ways and more expensive than articles, but they do play an important part in the research process, in particular disciplines. Next slide, please. So the scholarly monographs are particularly prevalent in the arts, humanities, and social sciences, and they play a very important role in disseminating research findings in these areas. Traditionally, monographs have been printed in very small print runs, maybe as little as 200, which makes it expensive to recover the first copy cost. Typically, there are no or low royalties in terms of what the authors will receive, and there are low or no research grants, which is the opposite of the fact of science and technology and medicine. So you would think that scholarly monographs are a prime candidate for open access. Next, please. There are numerous business models. Book processing charges, the same in effect as article processing charges made by the author or institution. Freemium, where publishers make one online version free and charge for other formats such as a PDF and other functionalities. Collaboration and coalition see institutions branding together, bringing together different skills and funding sources to boost open access publishing. Next, please. Particularly in the USA, there are grants and endowments which can support new ventures or can provide a regular income for university presses. An interesting approach is through library or crowdfunding, and this was famously tackled by Knowledge Unlatched, which brought together several hundred libraries, which funded the publication of open access monographs by publishers, which were open access. And what happened was that the libraries funded the process of making available the electronic open access copy of a journal. And the publishers therefore had that basic level of funding, and they were also able to sell versions of the monographs, particularly, for instance, providing print-on-demand copies. Revenue, some publishers, both commercial and university presses, do sell print copies or other formats and offer open access, as well as offering open access versions. Next, please. We have seen in the UK a wave of new university presses. Obviously, these were very prevalent or common back in the 19th and the first part of the 20th century, but they declined. But now we are seeing new university presses, which tend to be open access, to be digital first, to be based in libraries, and to publish both in monographs and journals. They offer fewer services than the traditional publisher, and can be seen to blur the line between publisher and platform. The GIST report estimates that there will be 27 UK presses by next year, new university presses. They can play an important role in fulfilling the university's research strategy, but obviously they must be subject to the normal rationale of peer review. Next, please. There is infrastructure growing up around monograph publishing. OARPN, which grew out of an European Union project a few years ago, offers services to monograph publishers. For instance, quality assurance. Publishers must pass tests that show that all their publications are peer-reviewed according to academic standards, for instance. OARPN also aggregates open access monographs and has, through the OARPN library, about 5 million downloads in 4 years. Next slide, please. Another part of the publishing infrastructure, which is supported by OARPN, is the Directory of Open Access Books, which is, of course, very similar to the Directory of Open Access Journals. It aims to increase the discoverability of open access books. And again, any books which are uploaded to the DOAB must be open access and must have been subject to independent and external peer review. So in March 2020, there were over 27,000 academic peer-reviewed books and chapters from 376 publishers through the directory of open access books. Next, please. An interesting white paper, which has only just been published, is about diversifying the readership through open access. Open access books show a higher diversity of geographic access than non-OA publications. So they're reaching more countries, and they're having greater proportion of usage in the wider range of countries. The research shows that OA books are increasing access and usage for the low or lower middle income countries, including a high number of countries in Africa. Next, please. Interestingly, downloads of open access books from the open web are double those from institutional network points. It's interesting to speculate why that is the case. Does it mean that these monographs are reaching people outside educational research institutions? Or does it mean that staff and students of the institutions are looking elsewhere on the internet for their open access books? Unsurprisingly, the research also showed that open access books have about 10 times more downloads and 2.4 times more than citations. Next, please. Now, turning to open data, it's long been recognized by funders and scholars that the outputs of publicly funded research should not be hidden behind paywalls. More recently, that principle has been applied to data, which again is publicly funded and produced. It's much more complex than open access and needs expertise not necessarily found in libraries for the manipulation and storage of large volumes of data. Next, please. Some definitions: information, in particular facts or numbers collected to be examined and considered as a basis for reasoning, discussion, or calculation. The examples do include statistics, obviously, but it is much wider. For instance, interview recordings and images, observations from fieldwork also count as data. Next, please. Again, as with open access, we need open data policies in institutions. They are emerging, but most of them will cover the following elements: timing, when publication should take place, the technical requirements of a data plan, who and what, who can share and on what terms. Long-term curation is obviously vital, and monitoring, any monitoring that is carried out will be carried out by the funding body. Storage is a major issue as well, and policy should also set out costs, where the costs can be claimed from and when they can be claimed. Next slide, please. There is this mantra published by the European Commission that data should be as open as possible, as closed as necessary. Obviously, there have to be exemptions from the publication of data. If a university sees a possibility to make commercially or industrially available for results for a large fee, for instance, in filing patents, then that cannot be disclosed under open data. There's also the question of confidentiality for security and rules on protecting personal data, which also have to figure as exemptions. Next, please. There are these 4 fair data principles that open data must be findable, it must be accessible, it must be interoperable and reusable. Those are the FAIR principles, which are very succinct, but do apply very well to open data. Next, please. Next, please. Spark Europe identified a few years ago a number of open data champions who were very much using open data. And they gave the following rationales for open data. So they can be often reused and reproduced. And again, research can only be reproduced and validated if the underlying data are available. The peer review process, as we currently have it, of course, is only a review of the article. It is not a review of the underlying research. Next, please. Actions which need to be taken to foster the prevalence of open data. There needs to be a change in the research culture, which may be brought about through academic incentives to lecturers, to researchers. And again, the policies of funders, just as for open access, can be very significant in insisting that data be made available. So it should become an integral part of researchers' education. And it must be made as easy as possible for researchers to deposit and share their data. Next, please. In the open data world, knowledge creation will be accelerated, bringing real-world benefits, particularly for medicine and business. It should be possible to draw on or incorporate large data sets outside academia, for instance, for meteorology and transport. And the availability of data with appropriate metadata should drive the development of interdisciplinary research. Next slide, please. There are resources available, which I have included in a sheet of references, but some of these are very good introductions to the production of open data. So I do urge you to have a look at them. The Spark Europe Open Data Champions work provides a rich seam of advocacy materials from 14 researchers. Next, please. So what are the roles of libraries to support open science? Well, the roles include building infrastructure and capacity, and LibSense is taking the lead in this for Africa. Libraries can take the lead on policies and mandates, both open access and open data. Libraries can also make open science an integral part of training and practice of research, and can support data through support open data through advocacy, and support open access monographs, the development of. They might consider setting up a new university press, and librarians must be in a position to facilitate access through open access button, for instance, or the directory of open access books. That is the end of my presentation. Perhaps we can go on to the last slide. Any questions?
Thank you so much, David, for such a wonderful presentation. I must say it's been very, very enriching. And whoever's attended is going to go away with a lot of knowledge. I have a number of questions so far that have come in. And as questions come in, then they will be shared and then responded to. The first question, I'll go one by one. The question that came in first was, have the SDGs been achieved in libraries as of today?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not aware of for instance, African libraries introducing SDGs, but I'm sure that there is a good range of support, for instance, in terms of the existing provision of information.
Okay. Someone also wishes to know whether open science is different from open access. Kindly elaborate.
Well, open science is the umbrella, if you like. It's the overreaching span, which contains many elements. For instance, it contains the elements of open access, of open data. So if you want to go back to and refer to the taxonomy from the Foster project, that illustrates the range of materials, the range of topics that come under the open access umbrella. Sorry, comes under the open science umbrella.
Okay, thank you. Another one would like to know or find out how to conduct storytelling in libraries based on SDGs.
Sorry, how? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Our question was that someone wishes to know how to conduct storytelling in libraries based on SDGs.
I'm not sure that I'm in a position to answer that one.
Okay, maybe probably this particular participant would be assisted by knowing the contribution of libraries towards the attainment of SDGs, could go to the field and try to ask the community, the other libraries, the field officers, and the like, all the partners to the libraries in relation to the attainment of the SDGs. Another question is, does the copyright policy impose penalty on offenders?
Does the copyright policy?
Does the copyright policy impose penalty on offenders?
Penalty, yeah. Yes, the copyright policy would have to be enforceable by institutions.
Is that all, David? Or you'd like to explain more? If that's all, then we could go to another question. Can a chapter book on a single subject, maybe can a chapter in a book on a single subject be containing many chapters, each chapter written by different authors, be also called a monograph? It's a very long question. I would repeat.
That's
Can a
okay.
chapter,
Yeah.
are you okay with it, or should I repeat?
No, I'm okay.
Okay,
Yes,
then proceed.
yes, that is one of the traditional forms of monograph publishing, that contributions will be brought together on a particular topic, so one topic, a monotopic, even though they are by different authors. They still count. It still counts as a monograph, the whole volume.
Okay, thank you so much. Another question is on what does open bids for funding mean? What does open bids for funding mean? Does
Right.
it mean that successful applications on shared openly like article would after acceptance, or that funding applications are open to collaboration bids before submission?
Yeah. So currently, in order to gain funding, individual institutions or coalitions of institutions will put in bids for funding. Now, there will only be one, perhaps two winners of the funding, but there may have been a dozen or 10 or 12 bids that went in. Now, typically for a high value funding resource, the process of bidding and the process of actually forming a bid and putting in a bid will take a year or maybe even 2 years. So that is a lot of time and effort to be, which can be wasted because several organizations, several institutions are competing with each other for the same funding. Now, an open bid will involve, will make the knowledge available of what is being bid for which resources of funding. And that means that if that is an open procedure, it is possible that it will become more efficient with bidders actually combining their strengths or deciding not to bid because they are not strong enough. So that's what open bids are about. And obviously there are questions of confidentiality there, and I'm not sure that open bids have really been seen yet, but they may be something which we see in the future. Okay.
Right. Thank you so much. Can we group open access, open data, open science under open science?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Can you group open access, open data, open source under open science?
Yes, they're all covered by the overall term of open science. People should have a look at the Foster taxonomy of open science, which gives an exhausting list of what is included under open science, right down to a very granular level.
Okay, thank you. Can all barriers be eradicated in open science? Can
Well,
all barriers be eradicated in open science?
well, I think they can be, apart from, I mean, we talked about open data, for instance. If a university has conducted a piece of research which has produced data which will be useful in, for instance, gaining a patent or some technological or scientific advance, then they will not make that available. So there is that commercial imperative, which means that the data won't be open. There is also the imperative of safeguarding individuals' data. So that is a constraint as well. For instance, if one has interviewed a large number of people on very sensitive topics, then that data should not be made available publicly, particularly if it can be traced back to individuals. So yes, openness in terms of open science is the goal, is the achievement, but there are real world things which can impinge on that and restrict that openness. It's an ideal, and we are moving towards it, thankfully. Okay.
All right. Another question is, how can you change the mindset of the community towards the engagement in relation to open science in attainment of the SDGs? How can you change the mindset of the community in terms of engagement in relation to open science towards the attainment of the SDGs?
Yes, I mean, it's a question of both a carrot, as we say, and a stick. It is, as I said, really vital to make open access, open science, open data an integral part of the research process in individual institutions. And that can be done by advocacy, particularly by librarians, in terms of what can be gained concretely in openness in research. But it also can be brought about by the big stick, where, for instance, a university will only accept applications for additional funding, additional promotion, if they are backed up by articles deposited in the repository and made open access. So that has a direct effect on the working terms and salary of researchers. So that can be brought into line as well.
Okay,
so,
thank you so much. Did you have something else to add on?
No.
Okay. This could be our last question in the interest of time. Could you elaborate on the slide about the business model?
Anything in particular? The business model for monographs?
Yes, business model for monographs.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that runs through the models. Okay. Yeah. Need to go back. Yeah. There we are. I think the second one there is one of the most interesting because it has actually produced quite a large number of open access monographs. And this was achieved by Knowledge Unlatched, which brought together several hundred academic libraries from across the world, which determined every year on publishing a number of textbooks and monographs available on open access. And what they did was to pay the publishers the cost of actually bringing an open access monograph to the external world, so that their costs, which they would have incurred by making available a copy for money, is guaranteed to them by Knowledge Unlatched. Then the monograph was made available on open access, but the publisher was enabled to make additional money out of, for instance, print on demand, which is very common, and making additional functionality to the books. So that's one of the most interesting ones and one of the most successful ones, and is a good indication of widespread worldwide collaboration. I think that's the main one to actually take notice of.
Thank you so much, David, for such a wonderful presentation. We have for sure enjoyed it, and we have learned a lot.
Okay.
This is evident from the level of engagement that has been so high. We sincerely appreciate. To the participants, we can't take it for granted. We say a big thank you to all of you who have made it today's webinar. The numbers are really, really big, and we thank you for making the webinars a priority. Please watch out for subsequent webinars that will be announced in the near future. Announcements on the upcoming webinars shall be made on AFRIA website and social media platforms such as the Facebook and Twitter. Please keep posted and updated. Please note that the webinar materials shall be shared to the participants. You may also need to note that no certificates shall be provided for this particular webinar. I wish to encourage institutions and library associations which are not members to AFLIA yet to join AFLIA by sending in requests to membership@aflia.net. All those institutions and library associations that are not yet members to AFLIA, please send in your request for membership to membership@aflia.net. Bye-bye, and God bless you all.
Goodbye, and thank you.